Very good afternoon, everyone. A very happy new year and welcome to the first of many webinars to be presented by uLawPractice for the year 2019. We thank you for joining us today, and we kindly request you to mute your phone lines as well as use the chat window, as always, to ask any questions that you may have during this session. Today's webinar has been accredited for 1.5 hours of professionalism CPD credits by the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick, as mentioned on our website. Okay, so do use your individual Law Society portals to log in 1.5 hours of professionalism credits of CPD credits in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. Okay. Now, today's webinar is going to talk about everything practice management, but that's the title of the webinar as well. And as the title sounds, we're pretty much going to talk about anything and everything that you need to keep in mind as you use your practice management methodologies to stay compliant, as well as a successful business owner of your legal firm. Okay, we're going to predominantly talk about the obligations as a legal practitioner in your individual jurisdictions in terms of Law Society compliance, as well as certain things expected by the appropriate Law Societies out of you as a professional in this business. What we've done is we've looked at the Law Society's bookkeeping guidelines, we've looked at the Law Society's compliance guidelines, and we've kind of boiled it to about 6 or 7 key areas of professional obligations, and we've kind of encompassed certain subsections and rolled it up into a larger subject matter, such as client intake. Then there's obviously the responsibilities for communication and service offerings. So if you look at it, we've got client intake, service, and communication. We've got file management, which is an important professional obligation from your perspective. We've got the financial management, business management, which is how well do you manage your expenses, how well do you manage your revenue, forecast, how can you ensure that you keep your law firm as a successful business, as well as a compliant business that the public can trust and deal with. Professional management, and this goes to a very good step that you've taken today in terms of keeping up with the required CPD credits in a year, as well as we'll talk about other areas of professional management that you may want to keep in mind to enrich your experience and to increase the knowledge as a professional in this industry. Time management, very important in terms of how best to parallel process across many different things that you may be stretched thin, many different aspects of your legal business that requires you to wear multiple hats, and how best can you manage time to be successful in each one of those different silos. And last but not the least, very important is in doing all of this, how do you still remain to be, in a sane thought process, to be cool, calm-minded, as well as ensuring that you're managing your personal time with family and friends, as well as giving that extra energy that's required to rejuvenate yourself to come back to do your legal work the next day. Okay, so different obligations, responsibilities, if you were to call it, and we'll talk about each item one at a time. And time permitting, based on feedback from yourself, we'll probably use a little bit towards the end of the session to walk through simple examples using uLawPractice as an example of a legal accounting product. We'll walk you through how you can potentially accomplish these steps, something that you should expect out of any practice management software. Okay. Once again, for those who just asked this question on our chat window, today's webinar is titled Everything Practice Management, and it provides you 1.5 hours of professionalism CPD credits in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. So let's start with our first subject matter, which is the professional obligation of client intake, service, and communication. Okay? And essentially what we're trying to cover here is talk to you and re-emphasize. I'm sure you already know many of these aspects of the expectations, but truly this session is to emphasize or reassure that if you already know these things, little pointers that can help you continue doing that, best practices. For those who are joining us who are just recent graduates and are starting their firm up very recently, this hopefully is a set of, I wouldn't say rules or policies, but really best practices that you can keep in mind as you look to adhere to the Law Society's guidelines. Okay? So there's a professional obligation with regards to intake of a client. Really, that's your first step in having a discussion or a conversation with the client, the different steps that are required to manage that process, leading up to the communication about how well you communicate your service offering to your client, and then the services rendered as well as a collaborative exercise of how you communicate as well as ensure compliance as you deliver that service to the client. Okay? And we've divided obviously certain subsections that you can look at, starting with first step really being an obligation of recording in detail the consultations and calls that you have with that client. That first step really, imagine a client either giving you a call to your office number, meeting you at a restaurant or a coffee place, even filling out a simple client intake introductory form on your website. No matter what the channel may be, it's very important that you do offer that omni-channel experience to today's consumer. But regardless of the channel through which you have that correspondence with that potential prospective client, it's important that you still have a detailed recording of those calls and consultations. Simple things as information about the client to begin with, first name, last name, correspondence or communication address, phone number if it's pertinent, email, etc., fax number. Further understanding what is it that the client would like for you to represent him or her, and if it does lead up to a possible matter, then taking pertinent steps to ensure that you're compliant, which is kind of our next step in the process, which is ensuring that there's a conflict check process as part of that client intake subject. What is conflict checking, or for confidential information? It's an important step that the Law Society requires you to conduct to make sure that you're comfortable in representing this individual. So it's legally right or appropriate to represent this particular individual who's walked in. And the conflict is really to figure out, the checking of the conflict is really to understand if I have dealt with the same individual for a different matter, have I dealt with this individual or any of the individual's family members or friends? By any chance, do I have some extra information about this individual prior, which may lead to a conflict, right? So this individual may have been an additional party in a totally different matter that you work with a totally different person. So the conflict check is really a way for you to understand if you've dealt with this person or someone similar in a different matter in your legal life. Now there's two possible outcomes. One is there is a conflict and hence it's not right for you to continue retaining this client. So you obviously explain the situation, explain the conflict, thank the person, the individual, for his or her business, and if possible, guide them through the process of, or I would say, talk to another lawyer friend and see if the lawyer friend can actually take up this file, right? Refer the client to another friend because of the conflict. Now the other side of it is because there's no conflict, you've never dealt with someone like this person or come across this individual, and hence it's totally okay to create the matter, okay? Just going to quickly type in, for those who've joined us using the computer as the audio, I sincerely appreciate if you could kindly use the phone numbers provided because it's a much more clearer audio experience. Thank you once again for that. So perfect, so you've done the right thing. You've got that prospective client. You've done the detailed recording of the information, what was it about, simple things like that. You've done a conflict screening, which is really to ensure there are no conflicts in representing this individual. And now is when you're actually going to start the process of creating a file, or what it's called as a matter in the legal lingo, right? Now comes the other aspects of this client intake, service, and communication. So as part of that process, one of the key aspects that you need to determine and ensure that there's a very prudent, transparent communication with your client, which is about the collateral for fees, or what is your fee structure? How do you go about charging your client for various different types of practice? What is your best practice for? Do you have a retainer process as part of your legal firm, or do you actually just complete the work and then ask for the money for the payment? Do you do billable time? Do you do flat fees, block fees, contingency fees? So clearly establishing the fee structure and how you would actually go about getting paid in completing the work for that client is a very important next step. Once you've determined that it's okay to continue creating that matter, as part of the next step, you do that. Now, what legal document can I, as a legal practitioner, utilize to outline the rules of the engagement? As the name sounds, it could be an engagement letter, or in certain cases called as the retainer letter when maybe a retainer is involved. Okay, so we'll take a slight segue to really talk about, as a next step, what these deposit of the retainers and trust accounts and what those important steps are. So as a legal practitioner, you probably are aware of the power and the responsibility that you have of being able to accept money from clients prior to completing the work, right? So there is the opportunity and the responsibility as a legal practitioner to be able to ask for money prior to doing the work. And that is based on a certain trust, the trust that you are a professional in this business, regulated by the law societies of your individual jurisdiction, and obviously there are consequences if things were to go wrong, things of that nature, right? So there's a law society that's governing you as a body. But there's a basic trust. And similar to how the name sounds, the law society requires you, if you are in the process or if you want to practice accepting retainers ahead of time for a certain type of work, that you do have a trust account with your bank. So if you're just getting started, or I'm sure you already know this, if you already have a trust account, you're very well aware of the law society's strict rules, guidelines, policies, you may call them one among the three, about how you manage trust funds. So let's assume this client walked in, no conflict, you've created a matter. First step is you really want to ask for a retainer, let's say $1,000. You can take that $1,000 and actually deposit it into your own bank account, your general bank account, which is your money or your business's money. You are required to deposit it into a trust account, and each transaction into that trust account needs to be ledgered and needs to be reported on a monthly basis as part of your compliance documents that you have an obligation to deliver to the law society, especially when you're being audited. Okay? They will audit you for your trust ledgers to make sure that there's prudence in how money has gone in and money's come out the trust account. So the retainer letter, which truly outlines the rules of the engagement, also talks about the rules of the retainer. So you accept the $1,000 upfront, and then also outline whether you need a retainer top-up every time the retainer comes down, or if it's a one-time retainer, what that amount is. Importantly enough, once the client does pay you that advance or that retainer, let's say cash or check or an electronic means of paying you, it's highly recommended that you provide them with a receipt of that payment, because the retainer is also a payment. It just so happens that the money that's being paid gets deposited into a trust account, but you still have to provide a receipt. Providing that receipt can also safeguard your own interest as a legal practitioner, because you want to make sure that that client does not come back after a few weeks to say that the client's paid you more than what they actually paid you, right? There's a receipt, then there's clear proof, and you can actually get it signed by the client to make sure that there's total transparency in that transaction. So for those who just joined us, we're looking at client intake, service, and communication as a step one in the professional obligations that you have with regards to Law Society, and how all of this is part of a larger practice management, I would say, guideline, if you will, or steps that you have to keep in mind as you run your legal life. Okay, so we've talked about the recording of the information, we've talked about conflict checks, creating the file, establishing the rules of the retainer or the engagement, including fee structure and the policy or process for retainer of accepting money in advance and providing receipts. Okay. Now, for whatever reason, there's always two sides of the coin. For whatever reason, if let's say things didn't go well as planned, or there's something else happened, there's a need for an exit, both from the client's perspective as well as from your perspective. So keep in mind, as you draft your retainer letter or your engagement letter, keep in mind to have an exit clause or a strategy, more so a clause within the documentation that you and your client can agree upon. Example, if you were to non-engage, we've quite often seen examples where if a client does not pay, I would say, in a very professional manner, right? If the payments are getting bounced back and forth, you could say if the payments don't go through in time, and if you have to go back and forth, deal with bounce checks and stuff like that, and if it's becoming a very horrendous process, much on your management's time, then you can clearly outline that after the first bounce check or second bounce check, if you're not doing the right thing, we may have the right to not engage you. Right? Likewise, you could provide certain level of flexibility in what the exit game would be for your client if they don't necessarily like the services being offered, right? And then the timeline with which they can offer that, etc., etc. So it's very important that you also have an exit strategy both for yourself and provide that flexibility to your client so they don't feel that they've been taken hostage. And for you yourself, as a legal professional, you don't have to deal with a bad egg or a bad customer who's not going to pay you on time and things of that nature, right? Because time is essence. You really have to focus on how you can manage that better, and you don't want to waste it in these tasks. Okay, so hopefully this was, in terms of just overall just getting started about client intake, service, and communication, very high-level aspects. Just an extra slide to emphasize components or attributes of a retainer or an engagement letter. Okay? We spoke about obviously the amount, we spoke about the rules, the payment structure, but fundamentally it's important that you outline the nature and scope of the matter. So if you are a legal firm that does provide services across various silos of legal practice, you truly want to outline whether this is a POA matter, small claims matter, this is a family matter, could be a criminal, etc., real estate, whatever is the nature and the scope of matter. Which really outlines, okay, the slip and fall situation with your neighbor, and this is exactly what happened, and really talking about What is it that you're looking to accomplish? What is the area of practice, nature, and scope of matter? Very important, and we emphasize this in almost every webinar that we provide, is as a legal professional, take the extra time to think about how to best articulate the responsibilities that your clients have in relationship to your firm. Okay, clearly defining what those boundaries are, what the flexibility is, and what are the things that you would not really tolerate. Client responsibilities include correspondence, being able to be proactive, or sometimes having that reaction time faster. So if you were to ask them a question, you may expect them to respond back to you within a certain time. Responsibilities such as paying you on time, right? We spoke about that briefly, about bounce checks. Responsibilities about providing you with truthful information, right? Being very truthful to yourself, really depending on the situation. So there could be various different components, but it's important for you to keep in mind, based on the area of practice that you specialize in, and define what those responsibilities need to look like. Method and frequency of communication. So it's a great habit to have that as part of your engagement letter. How often should someone expect a certain correspondence from you? And the correspondences could also involve invoices, right? How often should someone expect an invoice from you? How often should the client expect an email or a mail? What is that method as well? Spoke about retainer arrangements. So, you're going to pay me $1,000 in advance and then top up every time, or one-time retainer. And then any termination, we spoke about that, the exit clause. Any client confidentiality. So that's really outlining that you, as a legal practitioner, will keep your client's information confidential, and it's part of your rule book to do so. And any risks associated with the methods of correspondence. So emails, obviously they're in the cloud, right? We don't have, so most of the email clients that we use today, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, they're all based on the cloud. We've seen some of the retainer letters being well drafted, which talks about, this is in the cloud and these are some of the risks associated with being in the cloud. Or if you are going to be sending mail, the risk is what we saw recently. If there's a strike or something like that, and if mails don't get delivered on time, that's a risk associated with that method of communication as well, right? So you can be responsible for that. Okay. So hopefully that kind of wrapped your heads around the first fundamental step of an obligation that you have of how best to manage the client intake, being very clear about the service offering and the communication of that service offering and the overall correspondence with your client. Perfect. So the individuals come in, you've signed the retainer, the client's really happy that you're going to represent the file, and they leave your office. Now comes the next responsibility for your legal firm. If you're a sole practitioner, then it's your responsibility. If it's a legal firm, it's the legal firm's responsibility of combined task force. So you may even want to define individual job roles if this is a growing law firm or a legal firm, of each and every individual's key responsibilities within the firm, right? From a file management perspective, some of the key aspects of what the Law Society would like for you to keep in mind as obligations is ensuring that these files are unique to begin with. Okay? And the reason for them to be unique, again, ties back to being professional, time management, and ensuring that you don't lose track of the information if you don't have a unique process in place. So if there's two files with the same file number, then you're going to be spinning your wheels to really determine where you put the transactions in, right? So, if I were to just read out the slide, ensuring there's a file checklist for incoming matters, so a checklist for file management, okay? And these are some of the examples. Confirmation of conflict check, right? Have I done the conflict check before I even start a file? We spoke about that in the client intake. So maybe that's a checklist item number 1. We emphasize this next very step almost in all webinars, which is ensuring that you have a separate file number for each and every respective matter. And why we say that is even if there's a single client, and if you may have multiple matters for that same client, imagine a corporate client or just the same client with one being a POA matter and the other being small claims, keep in mind that you are required to maintain separate file numbers for each of those matters, even if it's for the same client. Okay? Ensuring that these files are chronological and secure, especially when organized electronically. And why do you need that? A good majority of time in a legal firm is spent towards searching for information, file information being one of the top reasons for a lot of time being spent in a legal firm. So if it's not electronic, then obviously you're in the old school manila folders and paper. But with the advent of technology in today's context, you are seeing a lot of the 21st century legal professional using electronic means of not only communicating, but also storing information of data. So if you do that, keep in mind that not only should that file number or file be unique, but it also should be cross-indexed so that you can really appreciate if that individual that you're conflict checking for was dealt with another matter, right? How well would you know if an individual XYZ was dealt with another matter for a client ABC, right? It's through this cross-index relationship and the ability for you to chronologically search for that information makes it even better. Part of the file management, make it easy, obligation is, again, being able to record client interactions, email, phone calls, in-person meetings, etc. And we spoke about the need for proper organization of these files so that it's easy and faster to retrieve, as well as going to give you the right tools to do your conflict screening and be very confident, because that's really the first fundamental step. Okay, so file management is all about, once I've created that matter, making sure that I have the right steps and process in place in my legal firm to manage that file, right from a checklist of, I would say, things that need to be accomplished before a file gets created, and once it has been created, a set of things that need to be taken care of to ensure the sanity of that file. So if multiple individuals in the firm are going to be involved in dealing with that file, you may also want to get down to articulating within the company the rate structure of these different legal individuals and how it's well associated within that same file as well, right? Okay. So let's then talk about step 3. So for those who just joined us a bit late, and that's totally fine, I'm just going to reiterate the 7 major steps that we spoke about early on about our professional obligations. So client intake, file management, spoken about those, and I'm just jumping into financial management. So we have 4 more to go, and I hope I'm well doing for time. And once again, we encourage you to use the chat window at any time to ask us any questions regarding what was being discussed today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel early Monday, Tuesday next week. And it is a CPD 1.5 hours of professionalism CPD credits that you get out of this session. Okay, so let's have a deeper dive into the financial management. So we briefly touched upon the need as a client intake to make it very comfortable and transparent to talk about how well fees are, I would say, managed, maintained, as well as paid for. So we're just going to try and expand on the financial obligations of managing money within a file as well as a legal firm. Okay. So step 1, very clear. As soon as you sign their engagement letter, it's well established about the fee structure. So we spoke about that, ensuring that it's, depending on the type of billability, billable time, flat rate, block fees, contingency, whatever it may be, based on the nature of the payment, the nature of the fee structure, the steps that you take to manage that changes, right? especially if you take the example of an hourly billing, keep in mind that it's your obligation as a legal professional and your legal firm to record the billable time of the work that you've been done through the client files, through the timesheets. Right? Certain corporate clients may actually ask you for timesheets for the work done. Ensuring that there's a proper accounting system that accounts for the time spent so that you can invoice the client on time. So actually having either a system doesn't necessarily mean a software. We're just talking about a system. And this could be a manual system as well, but we're just talking about the need for an accounting system in place to convert the legal work done by billability into the appropriate invoices, right? The prompt transmission and the delivery of invoices to a client. Again, this is a very important obligation, not only for yourself, but also to manage and maintain the professionalism of the fraternity, if you will, of the law society, right? So if you're going to be sporadic in how, as a legal professional, you send out those invoices, and if it's not properly timed or it does not marry with the actual rules of the game, then that obviously is not going to leave a good taste with your client, not just for that transaction, but for referrals and in general, depending on the severity of this could also reflect badly on the system itself, right? So it's very important, and that's why they make it almost a key, I would say, best practice, if you will, that you deliver these invoices in the right time. And what is the right time? The right time is what you define in your engagement. If it's a corporate client, if you tell them you're going to be doing it on a timely basis, so every 2 weeks, every month, right? So we have lawyers that we work with who do intellectual property, have corporate clients that they work with, and sometimes they're engaged on, they're retained for the whole year for all the work that they have to do for the business, and they are obligated to deliver timesheets and a monthly invoice or a bi-weekly invoice to the appropriate personnel. Now, in terms of a retainer engagement, if this is for a private client, you may have outlined, or if you do outline, that you're going to generate an invoice as and when work gets done, then it's best to stick to that routine because you're setting those clear expectations and the client is not caught off guard because they know to expect an invoice when the work was done. So you did that initial client meeting, generate that invoice, even if it's to indicate that you're going to be moving trust money from the trust account to the general account, right? So let's assume that trust situation. You've got that $1,000 retainer. You just finished your initial client meeting after that. You met the client for further consultation. And let's say you charge an hourly rate of $300, then depending on your situation, it may be $300 plus tax, or it could be just $300. It's important that you do generate that invoice, send it to the client to indicate to that client that now you are legally, I would say, it's possible for you to now move that $300 or whatever the tax may be. In Ontario, it's 13%, so it's $339. Moving that money of that eligible trust money from the trust account into the general account. Or if this was, let's say, a payment, there was no retainer involved, you just did that work, there's $300 of legal fees. Even worse, you just spent another $150 on a court fee, which you paid for yourself up front. It becomes even more important that you recover that money fast from that client, and hence invoicing on time is very important. Okay? I may have stressed that point a little bit too much with that storytelling, but hopefully I was able to drive through the message that kindly do use a structure or process to invoice that client in the agreed upon time, which makes best sense for your legal firm. And here's another one. Systematic tracking of any overpayments on accounts. This could also be, the better example that we have here is if someone is missing out on payments. So let's say you agree upon an 8/15 payment term and someone does not pay you regularly they always pay you net 45, so almost like a 30-day wait. First step is really acknowledging that that is happening. So you need to be able to track and measure that it is happening so that you have that data. And then it's obviously your discretion if you still want to continue working with that client, or if this is a pattern that you see within an area of practice, you may even want to reconsider that area of practice, right? If you're not going to get paid on time, then sometimes why do this at all, right? So keep in mind, from a financial management, there's two sides to this. There's one from the client perspective of managing and not misappropriating their funds, but also there is the responsibility for you to manage your own financial situation and making sure that you're smart, profitable business owners as well. Okay? Recording of general accounts through general receipts and disbursement, we just spoke about it. So if there's no retainer, and if you don't have that, I would say, secured blanket to fall back, and if this is all you paying upfront, then actually you have a bigger obligation for your own firm to ensure that you're getting paid. And the first step in doing that is tracking, measuring, generating the invoice, and then waiting for the payment or following up for the payment. As part of the financial management obligation, and this is where it comes, to predominant conversations that legal professionals have within colleagues and within the fraternity, is around the types of documents, financial documents, that auditors and the Law Society looks for out of legal professionals during a spot audit or any other type of audit, which are maintaining, right, ledgers, journals, both for trust account, for general account, and there are many other documents that can be specific to jurisdictions. But in addition to that, it's important that you have a way or a system to manage and maintain bank statements, canceled checks, and any duplicate deposit slips as well. And this could be paper, electronic, whatever format it may be. And why you need that is to ensure that you're able to back that up for your monthly reconciliations that you deliver, which is an obligation as well. Okay, so you have to manage your books, which are we spoke about that, ledgers and journals predominantly. And if you do have trust and general, you've got to do that for those accounts as well. And we'll talk about that in further detail later on. But in addition, keep in mind, if you have an electronic bank with, whoever you bank with, ensuring that you have bank statements, either have them downloaded on a monthly basis, if you can build that discipline, or at the least ensure that you have a process of getting it when required, right? It's got to be either this or that, but be prepared and plan for how you have to retrieve this information. And so those are obviously the Law Society's obligations. And then from a CRA perspective, for you being a business owner in Canada, you are required to obviously generate your financial statements such as income, expense, profit and loss, balance sheet, trial balance, right? Now, there's two aspects to it. One is obviously for the needs of the CRA, to file your taxes, income tax, provincial taxes for a business, but it's also for you as a business owner to better appreciate, I would say, the quality of financial health of your legal firm. Okay, how is this firm doing? Am I actually achieving the financial goals that I set out for myself when I first started to get into this legal career? Let's say you had the financial goal of making, it could be any random magic number. Let's stick with 100 grand. If that's the profit you wanted to make, that's the money you want to take home. Are you moving towards that number? Or are you already there? What can you do to improve yourself? Or if you're not there, really doing a cost analysis of why you're not there. And to do that analysis, you need all these information in the appropriate formats so that it makes faster sense of the numbers. Okay? My bad. So looked at financial management. Okay, so if you look at some of the documentation or documents, if you will, that you want to keep in mind, we spoke about the client ledger. Now, the ledgers could be specific to a client, but the Law Society does ask you for a ledger or a date range, predominantly a month. And in that ledger, you probably want to have all the clients that you've dealt with in that particular month that have an opening or whatever is their outstanding balance, both for trust and general, right? So ledgers are both trust as well as for general. Receipts for both payments to the trust. Disbursements, that's another type of journal for trust, as well as, so we look at trust. Let's say we look at that first. We're looking at trust ledgers, trust receipt journals, trust disbursement journals. So that's when you actually pay for disbursements, which are expenses on behalf of a client file, or you're paying for that out of your trust account. Certain law firms tend to pay for actuals such as court fees, application fee, and tend to actually write trust checks to pay for these because it's straightforward. It's one lesser work to be done, lesser headache to manage and maintain those. So that's one style of doing it, and if you do that, then you're required to provide trust disbursements journal, and of course you have to provide your trust reconciliation document as well, which is really comparing the bookkeeping software or system that you have to manage these books, which are numbers of transactions that have occurred in your firm, comparing that with the transactions that have been logged in real life in your bank accounts. Okay, making sure they balance, and if they don't balance, being able to provide a reason for why they don't balance. That's the step of reconciling that particular trust account. And the same thing applies to your general account. Having a general ledger or a client ledger for a general account, having a general receipts journal, so really a journal of how you received payments with methods as well. If someone paid you for the legal work done $500 in a check, making sure that you have that journaled by the client, by matter specifically, and how they paid for it. And most of the legal professionals that we talk to tend to actually use their own general accounts, whether that's a general business account or could be a general business credit card that they use to pay for client expenses or disbursements. Depending on how many such accounts you have, you obviously provide the journals for those general accounts for disbursements. And of course, the general reconciliation of the same work done. There's a lot of emphasis, of course, on the trust reconciliation, very, very highly emphasized, because that's one thing that the Law Society is pretty strict about, is having a check on how the trust account and the transactions within a trust account are utilized, making sure that there's no misappropriation of trust funds in your firm. Okay, so we've looked at client intake, we've looked at file management, we've looked at financial management, how you go about managing the books that are necessary as part of that outcome of dealing with our client. Right? So as these financial transactions, keep in mind, are just an outcome of the work that's being delivered in closing that file. So you open the file, you accepted a retainer, so that's a transaction. It needs to be logged in somewhere so that you can now prove to the Law Society that you've done the right thing of logging these things. So that's a ledger. Now you got paid for these things. Right? So that's a journal. If you've actually paid for expenses on behalf of the client because certain, files require that, then that needs to be also tracked. So every time a transaction occurs towards delivering a service for a particular matter, for a particular client, tracking and documenting, writing it down, or having a software system, regardless, needs to get accomplished. And last but not the least, having gone through all these transactions, ensuring that at the end of the month that you compare the transactions that you have recorded in your system. It could be an Excel sheet, it could be another legal accounting software, it could be anything else. Comparing that with the transactions in your bank is really the name of the game. Okay? How easy, how straightforward, and how cost effective, and how, I would say, business efficient manner you accomplish that is today's name of the game as the 21st century legal professional. Because there's many ways of doing this, right? You could take all the time that's required, but do you really have that time? Or do you rather spend that time to market your service and earn more revenue? So that's really the trade-off. Now let's move on to the next professional obligation, which is that of business management. Okay? So the Law Society obviously draws certain best practices, recommendations, but leaves it to you to manage and maintain and deliver these obligations. They don't mandate certain things. For example, does not mandate the use of legal software. What's important is that you have a system in place to deliver these documents when asked for. But if you're using a manual system, an Excel sheet system, or actually a leading legal accounting software, that's left to you. But they do recommend that for purposes of time and, to be a 21st century lawyer, if you will, or a legal professional, if you want to save time, maximize the use of any help that you can get, tools that you can get, individuals that you can work with. Now, from a file maintenance, we spoke about signing up the responsibilities with your client as part of that engagement letter. An important component, if you remember, was confidentiality. So when you save your client's information within your legal firm's ecosystem, whether that's manual, as I said, through paper, just hardcore paper, having manila folders, and having a file, a cabinet file, a real physical cabinet file in your office, that's one way of doing it. But there's risk rewards to all of these. Okay? So how have you insured yourself against fire, theft, etc.? What happens when that happens? Not only that, are you able to be efficient if you leave all your folders in the office, and if you need access to certain files? What are the best ways you can do that, even if you're at home? Right? Important that you manage the security component of managing your client's information. And if those things were to happen, maybe you have a process to back up that information. So if this is paper, then you're probably taking photocopies of these files and keeping them in a separate location. But again, with the advent of technology, you are able to provide the same experience through a software, through cloud services, where backups happen automatically. But there's the risk and reward of going down that process as well. The Law Society wants you to be thoroughly aware of the pros and cons, but keep in mind you need these to deliver an efficient service to the public. Being able to, if you're using mobile devices, knowing the risk reward of those. Obviously, a great reward is being able to provide access and communicate in time, being that very responsive legal professional that clients would love to work with because they get their answers, or questions answered rather, in a much faster time. Versus having to wait for a correspondence via mail for every time someone asks a question. So again, but the risk of using mobile devices is making sure that you have a proper password protected mobile device that only you have access to it, secured ways of saving data, etc., etc. Remote access. So now this is talked about, again, the business management component is recommendations provided for you to have the right tools in your business and in your firm to deliver an efficient service to your client, right? So you don't drop the ball for not having planned for the appropriate tools to deliver services in time, because that comes back as a complaint from the public to the Law Society saying, I dealt with this legal professional, very unprofessional, did not respond back in time, very unprofessional, I dealt with them and then they lost my file. They actually had a fire and all my files were, burnt down, my checks were gone, it could be anything. So to properly provide the right recommendations so that you can always have a backup plan for these types of things and yet provide a high level of service level to your clients, to the public, is why they outline these as obligations, right? Remote access is one such thing, is being able to provide or have access first and foremost to your client's information from wherever you are, right? Today you see the evolution of the legal career. Before it was in a brick and mortar office, but now you see entrepreneurs, you see legal professionals taking it up as a business, and the need to manage time. You're mobile, you can actually do this from anywhere you are. And to do that, you need the appropriate tools. You need the plan to purchase, acquire, share these tools that can then enable you and amplify the level of service level that you can provide to your clients, right? So keep in mind that you do have access to files, to client information, tip of your fingers if you're utilizing cloud. If you're using system-based or desktop-based or software that you're using, Excel sheets, then obviously you're limited to the devices that you're using. But there's, of course, pros and cons to all these different varieties. You, as the owner, have to make the appropriate decision that's right for you and choose the right tools that gives you that winning edge. Okay, moving along to professional management. So the law societies of different jurisdictions obviously talk about certain obligations of professional management. So one, obviously, you're already here, keeping this in mind, which is the completion of the required CPD hours, or professional development hours, if you will, for that profession, right? So you have substantial and professional. So today's webinar gives you 1.5 hours of professional CPD hours. So you've been here the last 55 minutes to listen to me talk, and even if I have maybe put you to sleep, I welcome you to a recording next week. So hopefully that didn't happen. But you've taken that first step. So that's one obligation, is to complete the required CPD hours within that year. Okay? Other things that they talk about is considering membership with professional associations. One, there's a bond that's built within common minds. There's opportunity for associations to hopefully provide you with better services, discounted softwares, discounted service agreements. So it really builds a bit of a social commitment within like-minded individuals, legal professionals. There's also an opportunity for learning from others' mistakes, having conversations that are similar in nature to your situation, so you pretty much learn from that, right? So recommended to consider being members of professional associations, reviewing legislative laws as well as any new legislations, case laws, things that are changing, right? So one of the examples, in the province of Ontario, some of the newer changes that were made to the POA, the Provincial Offences Act, right? So really being abreast of what those changes are. One such thing is, the fees and penalties and things of that nature that affect the use of, distracted drivers is a very key example. So if you are a legal professional that serves that industry and that particular area of practice, you better be aware of those changes. You don't want your client to tell you what those are. Not that it will be the case, but again, that's an example of how you are required to stay on top of the game and be current by making sure you're reviewing legislations and case laws, and this could be examples that can extrapolate it to other areas, criminal, family, etc. Right? Very naive example. And reviewing professional conduct guidelines. So this is, being a legal practitioner, at least from a public's perspective, is viewed as a very highly regarded profession in the society. Right? Someone who keeps the law up, who's there to help the common man or the common people. So there's a certain level of conduct, professionalism, conduct that's expected of the legal professionals. So making sure that you're doing constant surveys within your firm for feedback from employees. This could be for many things, right? From sexual harassment to this could be for, harassment in general. Could be success factors. There are many different types of conduct guidelines that the Law Society outlines, both on their portal as well as within the bookkeeping guidelines. So do read them, do get to know them better, so that you're well prepared in not only orchestrating the service that you want to offer, but actually putting to the right policies within your firm to adhere to all of these requirements from the law societies. Okay? So we'll kind of come down to the last two. We'll start with time management. I'm no Stephen Covey, but time management is critical for legal practitioners. More than, I believe, having done this for many years now, I believe for more than any other practice, any other profession, I believe the need to multitask, the need to juggle multiple balls at the same time, to do different things and keep in mind different things at the same time, and especially if you're in a business where time is money, managing that time is very critical. So the Law Society does give you, again, those friendly recommendations of keeping in mind that you are required to manage time. There are no excuses when you are, let's say, dealing with 25, 30 files, and for whatever reason you didn't manage time. You didn't get to the court when you probably should have, right? That's an obligation that you are at court to deliver that service to your client. But for whatever reason you didn't manage your time well, you did not know that you had to be in the court that day, and you did not even arrange for a stand-in, then that is a problem. So managing time is very important, and there are products and systems, software that's available. It could be part of your legal accounting software, it could be a separate calendaring software, it could be a tickler system, whatever it may be. Managing it through a process, system, software, very important to manage time. Some of the examples they provide you is maintain a to-do list. Very straightforward, right? It almost seems like I know this. But they say it nevertheless. This is something cool. They talk about how a legal practitioner should always be focused in managing the active files. What that really means is if you actually completed work successfully for a client, do take the opportunity to mark that as a closed file, something that you're done with. You don't have to deal with anymore. And then focus on the ones that you're currently working or the ongoing files. So don't clutter your file management with files that are done with. Focus your time so that you can quickly search and access files that you're currently working on. Okay? So that's a good tip to have as you have a process to manage your files. And this is another very important, I would say, guideline for legal practitioners. Time docket for non-billable time. Really keeping a tab on the amount of pro bono that you may end up providing on a periodic basis. Okay? The legal practitioners, as you probably know, for many reasons, may often provide time to time to clients. Sometimes when friends are clients, could be, as I said, many reasons. It could be a marketing strategy. Legal practitioners do provide pro bono service, which is basically work done for free, right? So it's really not a time that can be billed is really the essence of it. But sometimes if you don't track these, you may be actually doing this out of sheer practice and doing this time and again. Because that's when you're like, I think I put in so much of work, but I'm not getting the kind of revenue that I should be. Why is that, right? So maybe it's the amount of pro bono you do. So the Law Society of Ontario, I believe, early last year did a survey and really wanted to emphasize this particular point to legal practitioners of having a process within the firm to really have a better measure of the pro bono work. I apologize. Not sure what happened right there, but I think we were all kicked out. Hopefully you can all hear me again. Please do use the chat window to let us know that you are able to hear me. I am recording this conversation, so once again, apologize. So we were looking at the different obligations, and we just finished talking about time management, and I'm going to quickly jump into personal management. And we've looked at the entire set of guidelines provided by Law Society, and we've kind of boiled it down to the top 4 components that you may want to keep in mind. One is with really being satisfied with being a legal practitioner, right? One of the things we've often heard, we've read articles, we speak with other legal colleagues in the business, is sometimes there's a sense of purpose, there's a sense of accomplishment for legal practitioners in this business, and it's one of the fundamental reasons that you educated yourself in this line of business. You are a daredevil in true Netflix terms, but in doing so, sometimes legal professionals may end up really burning themselves, burning their energy. Sometimes there's a need for being rejuvenated, as I said, to get back the next day to do that same thing again and win that case, litigate, whatever it may be, right? So often it's important that you individually or as a group within a legal firm are able to internally audit yourself and really understand what gives you that satisfaction. If it's money, so really setting up those goals are very important for that individual personal management. If money is really your goal, then as I said, you need the right tools that can allow you to track, measure, and provide you with the data points that empowers you to take proactive steps towards accomplishing that goal. If you don't have the right tools, then you're not going to be able to measure what's happening within your business, and then that's just going to lead to frustration. So if money is the goal, have the right tools that can guide you to accomplish and achieve that goal, right? Just as an example. So really define what satisfaction means to you and have the right tools and mechanisms that allow you to enjoy that satisfaction of being a legal practitioner. So satisfaction could be with growth, with progress, financial success of your practice, as we discussed. Recording of your time spent at work and vacation taken. Once again, I don't think this is truly a story, but I truly believe some of the legal practitioners that we've dealt with often spend and they burn the midnight oil, often require a well-deserved break. And the Law Society, believe it or not, recommends that. They do recommend the timely vacation, however fancy or however it may be for you, but recommends a vacation or a break as a must to really bring back the sanity of you being a legal practitioner, right? Sometimes it's just haphazard. There's just so many different things happening around you, and it's like, is it really worth all this, right? So once in a while, you need to give yourself that break to reassure yourself of those success goals, reflect upon what that success means, and we do it all best as human beings when we take a break, when with loved ones, when we can take our mind off what we do on a daily basis. And of course, Law Society emphasizes the need for legal practitioners to have the right process to ensure proper work-life balance. Okay? And this goes back to the amount of stress that's related to your job or to your career. So this is a very stressful field of work, and hence it's important that as much as we prepare for a vacation, which is kind of once in a year or twice a year, the work-life balance is something that you need to emphasize on a daily basis. Okay? Have the appropriate, as I said, tools to allow you to manage time, docket on time, measure pro bonos. Okay? Systems and tools, very important. Getting away from doing things manually could be a great first step that you may want to consider in the new year if you are in that right now. If you can get hired help, if that's the way you approach things, maybe that's what you work towards. Or maybe investing in the appropriate products that gives you the time, reduces the amount of manual work that you need to put in, and hence reduces the amount of stress involved, that's a different thing. If there's a certain area of practice, for whatever reason, is stressful at the same time, it's not as profitable, maybe it's time for you to reconsider whether you really truly want to continue delivering service in that area of practice. Right? Often, if you look at POA, it's a matter of managing multiple files at the same time to accomplish a certain revenue target. Okay? So maybe that's your expertise. And if that is, that gives you a satisfaction, and if it also meets your financial goal, then you can work towards other aspects that can reduce that stress. But if you compare it and it's really not making sense, maybe just reconsider doing something else, another area of practice. Maybe do some additional education so that you can emphasize your service levels in other areas of practice, right? So the personal management is truly taking a step away from what you do on a daily basis. Reflect upon the work done in 2018, perhaps. Rejuvenate yourself. Set goals. Talk, to friends and colleagues in the industry that you trust. Go out there. Socialize yourself. That's another big thing. Just be social. Be happy with what you've accomplished as a legal practitioner. And yes, we all can do better for ourselves than having a plan of action that's going to help you, because keep in mind that you know better than we do at uLaw that your time is money and time is of essence, and it's important that you take the right steps to protect time for yourself, for your family, and for the work and the success that's accomplished out of that work. Okay? And we spoke about this, so we're going to just throw it out there. Practice management is a series of process and steps. It's well established through software in today's context. We at uLaw are a legal accounting and practice management software ourselves. And we believe that, and again, we leave it to you as a legal practitioner to do the appropriate research to find the right software that's best for you. No matter which software you purchase, be confident in the use of it. Train yourself, because any software for that matter needs a bit of training, because you're going to enter data into that software to deliver the results that you're looking for. I mean, it's not as automated that someone can, it's not a Black Mirror, right? It's not a Black Mirror series out of Netflix. We don't know what you're doing. We can't just read it off your brain, and hence any software would require you to enter data. But each software differentiates itself and how easy they make that data entry process. And each software differs from how easy they make the delivery of reports and documents, such as compliance documents, that are mandatory for your practice. So that's what it comes down to, finding that comfort with a practice management software that can incorporate everything that's required to meet these obligations and give you that peace of mind, and of course, in today's context, be cost-effective, compliant, but also be giving you the freedom of working from anywhere. So that's why we talk about cost of ownership, delivering efficiencies in your practice, providing with Law Society compliance. Okay, and if it can also provide you with the flexibility of working from anywhere, because you are that empowered mobile legal professional, then nothing like it. I'm going to kind of really skip some of these aspects that are more specific to uLaw. From a time management perspective, we spoke about this briefly, and I'll touch upon it. We've often seen law firms that they're still doing manual, file-based, paper-based, file-based work, but they may actually have a calendaring system. Okay, today's practice management softwares do often offer the calendaring or particular system just part of the package. Again, it's just a matter of doing the appropriate research to find which ones provide the best comfort for you. But having a calendar that can manage both personal time as well as the work time in a single unified view reduces the amount of manual effort and stress that you have to put on yourself, right, to manage the work. So having a calendar hopefully does not stop you from getting to that court in time or doing the appropriate steps. Worst case, you can't get there. You can at least plan for a stand-in or a standby to represent you on your behalf. So keep in mind the calendaring system is important, but it may just be more important if it's well combined with a practice management software. Reiterating the need to manage both your trust and general. And I'll add to this one last thing, that it's not a must to have a trust account. This is a question we get asked often, and I want to just stress upon the fact that a trust account is not a mandatory process. Okay, Law Society does not mandate that you have a trust account. But having said that, trust account, as I mentioned, one of the very few professions in this world have the opportunity and the power and the responsibility, of course, of being able to accept money in advance. So it's totally left to the law practitioner's discretion based on really assessing yourself. When assessing yourself, ask yourself, hey, if I were to use a trust account, there's a certain level of discipline that's required to manage and maintain this. Do I have it? Yes, fantastic. Do I have it? No, but can I learn it? Is the pros and the advantages of having the trust account, does it overweigh, my lack of discipline or procrastination that I may tend to have, right? If it overweighs, then put the effort to build the discipline and to deliver the accounting principles and guidelines that are required. Okay. Now, legal accounting software, there are many examples. I'm not going to throw out names. Legal accounting software allows you to manage trust and general in a single platform. Okay, so it's not just like a general bookkeeping software. Legal accounting softwares were purpose-built to manage trust accounting, trust ledgers, general ledgers, and the journals and all those documents we spoke about. So if trust is really important to your business, okay, and that gives you that comfort of being able to accept money in advance so that you're not spinning your wheels, doing the work, sending the invoice, and not getting paid. So that's one of the important components that the trust and the retainer provides to you as a legal practitioner, right? It gives you that comfort. You've already got the money in advance. So once you've done the work, generate the invoice and just move the money from trust to general. So if that's important to you, as you consider practice management softwares, do keep in mind that there's a silo of practice management softwares that include legal accounting. So consider doing the research on those. And that pretty much comes to the end of really my presentation. I want to spend the last 2 minutes just reiterating the whole emphasis that we had for today's webinar, which is on everything practice management. It's a CPD accredited webinar in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. You could use your individual law society portals and use everything practice management as the title to clock 1.5 hours of professionalism CPD credits. This session is being recorded and will be available as well as early as Monday or Tuesday next week, so that you can check us out on our YouTube channel. And all these are recorded, transcribed, and dated, so you pretty much can easily search for it. And the 7 things that we spoke in detail are the professional obligations of the individual law society. So we had done enough research to read the law society's guidelines for professional obligations across provinces, and that's how we pretty much encapsulated the essence of all that the law societies are talking about under these 7 headings: client intake, service, and communication, file management, financial management, business management, professional time, and then personal management. Okay? So with that, I will stop today's webinar, or stop me from talking furthermore. I once again thank everyone who joined us today for this webinar. Once again, we wish you a very happy 2019, and we look forward to delivering more value-added webinars this year as part of uLawPractice. We are a Canadian legal accounting practice management software company. As part of that research, do give us a look on our website. It's uLawPractice.com. Do the research, do the right thing for your firm, for yourself, and utilize the right tools that can provide a seamless experience of delivering these important aspects of law society guidelines. Okay? Now I'll open the floor for any questions that you may have that me and my support staff can answer using the chat window. Thank you once again. All right, so there's one question around timesheets. So I'm going to quickly just, show it to you because it's faster that way. So when you look at timesheets, and if you look at the different components of data points that you capture, you could pretty much have timesheets by the time that's spent on a particular client. You could have timesheets by different employees. This could be over a date range, right? So if you truly understand this timesheet for the month of January for 2019, we've got individual legal professionals in the firm. So we'll start with Amrit Singh and the work Amrit Singh has done. So there's initial client meeting, work done for this particular client, Boris Becker. very important in the timesheet is to also provide, estimated time and billable time. So estimated is really what you plan for. Billable is what really you bill the client. For example, you had spent 42 minutes, or in this case, Amrit Singh had spent 42 minutes on this particular telephone conversation, but for whatever reason, only billed the client 12 minutes. So that's 30 minutes of unbilled time. So we went back to talking about being able to measure that. So if you didn't have a mechanism to track and measure it, you wouldn't be able to reflect upon it. So here's a quick reflection. That was 30 minutes given away by Amrit Singh. It was not billed, rather. Okay? And it was perfect. So this is truly an example of a timesheet and the different components that you can generate out of that timesheet. Now you can also generate just a normal timesheet or a date range, which is not specific to an employee. But especially in a multi-law firm or a legal firm situation where there are multiple legal practitioners, it probably makes sense to divvy them up by employee. So this is a typical timesheet by date. So you can either do by date or you can do it by employees. So hopefully that answered that question. Okay? If there aren't any further questions, once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Have yourself a great 2019, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar next Friday. Thank you, and take care.